Alright guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today. For this one we are going to do another out and about video. So I'm still in Berlin, the German capital, and this time we are in the Pfefferberg district, which is it's pretty much in the centre, just a little bit north, and we're going to check out this place behind me here. So this is the Shankhalle at Pfefferberg, and we are going to have a little look at the Brau Gasthaus. So this should be quite interesting. They've got a nice list of beers in here, and they've got some nice food. So we'll do as we always do, we'll go in, we'll have a look around, we'll try some of the beers, we'll try some of the food, and hopefully you guys enjoy this one. So catch you guys in just a second. Alright guys, so we had the munch, waiting for the next beer to come because the Pilsner's nearly done. But yeah, just to let you have a little look around, this is really quite nice, just to let you see the outside of the place before it gets too dark. We might need to go in and film some other beer tastings later on, but yeah, this is really nice. You saw me just in front of there earlier on, but yeah, this is pretty cool. So let's finish this and get our next beer in. Catch you in a second. Alright guys, well, time for our first tasting then here at Pfefferbräu. So they were on me quite quick as soon as I sat down asking me if I wanted a beer. That's just how it goes in Germany, but it's good service, you know. So yeah, going for something easy to start off with, as we always do. They had a Pils on the menu, so there we are. So this beer is called the Pils. It comes in at 5% ABV. You already know what style it is. So when they brought this out to me, it came out with about 2 fingers of a frothy, I would say, kind of slightly cream coloured head. It wasn't perfect white. You can see that has faded away just a little bit while I was getting the camera and things set up. But yeah, in terms of what you would expect appearance-wise from a Pilsner, it's nothing surprising. So yeah, you've got this lovely kind of naturally hazy golden colour to this one, lovely kind of pale. Yeah, I wouldn't say pale actually, I'd say more of a rich kind of golden straw. You can see a steady stream of bubbles going up towards the bottom of the head there. But overall, it looks very, very nice. As I say, nothing surprising about the appearance of this one when you consider what style it is. So yeah, let's have a little look at the aroma of this one and see what we have. So yeah, aroma-wise, this one I would say it actually comes across as being a little bit more of a kind of slightly yeasty and kind of bready Pilsner actually, which is quite interesting. I've always said that for me, when I've been doing these videos, the main difference between the German Pilsner and the Czech Pilsen, if we can call it that, is that the Czech one always tends to be a little bit more kind of yeasty and bready, whereas the German one is a little bit more kind of cleaner almost, just a little bit more kind of clean and crisp actually. So yeah, I'm curious to see what this one's going to be like just on the basis of the aroma. But yeah, this one, it comes across as really quite bready, but at the same time it's got a really nice kind of bit floral grassiness going on. Of course, you've got that nice kind of, it does, the more that you smell of it, the more it shows that German kind of crisp and clean side, which I really quite like. So yeah, there's a wee boy running around shouting yeah. He's obviously happy to be at the brewery, who can blame him? But yeah, yeah. So, as I said, this one, the more that you smell of this beer, you start to get that German side of the Pilsner, the kind of crisp cleanliness to it. But yeah, let's break it down a bit more. So you've got a lovely little bit of kind of fresh white bread crust in there, lots of fluffy white bread, of course. You can smell a little bit of that kind of dry crispness from the Pilsner malt. Always a characteristic. On top of that, you've got a little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuit sort of aroma coming out of this too. So you are getting a little bit of the sweeter side of the Pilsner in there too. The hoppy side of this one, it's interesting. I've always said that German hops, the Hallertau and the Tettnangers, they always have this really nice brightness to them. This one actually has a little bit of kind of spiciness to it. And I've always said that, you know, Czech hops are a little bit more kind of spicy than German ones. But at the same time with this, you get that lovely smooth earthiness, you get a little bit of the kind of herbal character in there. You've also got a little bit of kind of floral aromaticity as well there. And I would say that overall the green component of this beer is a little bit more kind of floral and aromatic. It is a little bit more kind of floral and aromatic, but you get a nice wee bit of grassy zestiness to it as well. Yeah, the green component, the more you smell it, the more floral it gets actually, which is quite nice. I wonder if this has maybe got Pearl or Hercules or something like that in it, because like I say, it is a bit more spicy than your typical regular, you know, Hallertau Mittelfrüh or Tettnanger Mittelfrüh or whatever. So this one does come across as a wee bit more spicy. On the fruity side of things, in the aroma you're getting a little bit of that sultane type note, like a little bit of a dried white green grapey note, a little bit of a kind of pear, maybe a bit of a fresh green apple kind of thing. maybe even a little bit of dried apricot. You know, these are all typical notes that you would get from a Pilsner. So yeah, let's have a taste of this one then and see how we get on. The aroma is very, very nice. This is the Prenzl Pils, 5% ABV, my first beer here. My first beer here at Pfefferbräu in Berlin. Slange, Skål, cheers, Prost. Yeah, that's really nice. If I was tasting this blind without knowing it was a Pilsner, I would actually probably guess that this was a Helles. It takes a little bit of time to show you the kind of slightly drier and slightly hoppy characteristics that you would expect of a Pilsner as opposed to a Helles. But yeah, it's really nice and very, very clean. So I do like that. Oh, my food's just come. Pause a second. Alright, I'll show you the food in just a minute. It looks pretty damn good. But yeah, as I was saying with this one, it takes you a little bit of time to show you those kind of drier and more kind of hoppy Pilsner characteristics. But yeah, let's break it down. Middle of the palate then, you've got a little bit of that kind of fresh white bread crust again forming the backbone of the beer. You've got a nice kind of thinner layer of fluffy white bread on top of that. Toward the back of that middle third of your palate, you start getting that kind of crisp malty character that you would expect. You know, the kind of crisp Pilsner malt character that you would expect of this style. But like I say, that takes a bit of time to show. So on first tasting, if you like, you might think this is a Helles, but it develops into the kind of Pilsner. If you come further forward on the middle third of the palate, you get a little bit of a McVitie's digestive biscuity note out of it. And that sweetness does linger into the aftertaste. On the back third of the palate, you can feel more of the yeasty characteristics of the beer. So the white bready layer we're talking about gets a little bit taller and it's a little bit more kind of fluffy, if you like. But then on top of that, there's a little bit of a kind of you're getting a bit more of the kind of yeasty esters coming out of it. So there's a little bit of a kind of crackery note in there, like Jacob's cream cracker, and you can feel the flavours a little bit taller, and then it just condenses down a little bit more the further forward you come. So hoppy side of things then. Yeah, kind of as you'd expect. Back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness there. As you come further forward, it's a little bit more herbal. As you go to the front corners of the palate, it gives you a little bit more of that kind of spicy floral aromaticity, which is nice. As I say, I suspect that there's maybe a bit of Hercules or a bit of Pearl, one of the slightly higher alpha acid German hops in this one. But round the front curve of the palate, it's lighter, it's grassy, and there is a wee bit of zestiness in there as well, but it does show a bit more of an oily side the further you go into it too. Front third of the palate then, and the fruity side of the beer. So the base of that front third of the palate is, of course, white bread, and that works really well. But the fruity side of the beer is kind of as I expected it was going to be from the aroma. So at the back of the front third of your palate, you get a little bit of a kind of sultana, you know, dry white green kind of grapey note. As you come further forward, there's a little bit of apricot in there, but then you start to get some really kind of oily, peary notes, and as you push into the very front kind of tip of the tongue, you get a little bit of an almost kind of limey note out of it, a little bit of kind of fresh green apple. Then you get all the kind of more zesty, grassy notes coming out of the beer. So yeah, it's good. It really is nice. It's a beer that really kind of grows. The more you drink of this, the more Pilsner-like it becomes from that initial impression of it being like a Helles lager. So yeah, I like that. Mouthfeel-wise then, to round off. Yeah, so mouthfeel-wise, I'd say it's one of the slightly heavier Pilsners I've come across. I'd say it's top end, light-bodied. Carbonation's quite smooth in this one, but you get a bit of crispness and stuff from the malt in the beer, as we've said. IBU-wise, I think this is probably about 30-ish IBUs. You get more bitterness out of it in the aftertaste. The malt base is nice and smooth. It's got a little touch of sweetness to it, and you've also got a little bit of that kind of fruity character as well out of this one. And the fruitiness has a wee bit of dryness to it as well, which I do like. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about this one. So that's the end of our first beer tasting. This is the Prenzl Pils at 5% ABV. I'm impressed with this one. I'm curious to see what the other beers are going to have in store for us. So I'll catch you guys in a second. We're going to have a little look at this food that's just arrived. So looking forward to that. So yeah guys, this is what I ordered. It was simply called fried chicken on the menu, so you can see we've got some lovely potatoes here, nice little bit of chicken. It almost looks a bit like schnitzel actually. We've got some sauce as well, and I'm not sure exactly what this is, but yeah, they were out with that really fast, and we've just had our Pilsner. So yeah, let's have a look at this and see what we have here. Alright guys, so the first thing on my mind as soon as this plate arrived was, what is this? So we'll open up and see what we actually have. Never seen this on a plate before. It's too fancy for Scottish people. We're not the most culinarily enlightened people, I guess we could say. But, just a bit of lemon. Okay, I'm not going to be putting that on. I don't like lemon on my chicken or whatever. But there we go. Nice idea, nice idea. But yeah, have a little look and see what the sauce is. Some of these potatoes. Try them on their own first, because you guys seem to like it when I do the kind of food reviews as well. But yeah, we've got this, just like a really thick crisp actually. But yeah, that's really nice. Little bit of salt to it, just really nice kind of airy potatoes. It's great. You get this, you find this. So there's loads of different types of potatoes here in Germany, and they're all just worth trying. I think I'm just going to be a savage with this and fire it in the sauce. You know, see what kind of sauce this actually is. It's like a sort of chili mayo, this one. So yeah, it's not bad actually. Don't normally go for kind of chili mayo. I'm more of a garlic man, I have to say, or blue cheese mayo. That's always very nice. But this is pretty good. So have a wee look and see what the chicken's all about. So yeah, these things are monsters. 3 pieces, it's good. So we'll try it on its own first and see what it's all about. So yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's pretty nice on its own. Just really nicely cooked, soft chicken, nice and crispy. It's a very straightforward dish this, but you know, if you're drinking a nice Pilsner beer or a nice German lager of any description, it's going to work. So let's try a little bit of this with the sauce and see what it gives us. Yeah. Very nice with the sauce as well. Just gives you that wee bit of slight spice to it that you want. I mean, it is nice, but on its own, the chicken is a little bit plain, I would say. But yeah, mix it in with the sauce and do that. Of course, they would want you to put the lemon on it, but I've never liked lemon juice on meat. I've never been a big fan of that, I have to say. But yeah, quality of the food is pretty damn nice actually. So I'm going to pause it at that for the food tasting, and I'll catch you in a second with a little look at the menu, and we'll try one of the other beers as well. So catch you then. Alright guys, well, time for tasting number 2 then here at Pfefferbräu. So the next beer we're going to have a little look at is a style that I don't get to review very often. Not many breweries in Sweden brew these, and back home in Scotland not many breweries brew it either. So whenever you get the chance to try one on tap in Germany, go for it, because they tend to be pretty interesting. So the beer is called Sommermärchen, which translates into English as like the summer fairy tale, I guess you could say. It comes in at 5.6% ABV, and this one is a Hefeweizen, or literally as it would be from German to English, like a yeast wheat beer. So yeah, you can see this one, colour-wise, it's quite interesting. This one's a little bit more sort of amber than some of the Hefeweizens I've come across. When it came out, it had about 2.5 fingers of a frothy, I would have said, kind of cream-coloured head, not perfect white. But yeah, this one, I think this is definitely one of the darker looking Hefeweizens I've come across, or regular Hefeweizens I should say, Naturtrüb, unfiltered Hefeweizens. Of course you can get Dunkelweizens, Weizenbox and all these kind of things. But yeah, it looks good. Lovely kind of cloudiness to this one, as you'd expect, with the wheat content and the yeast content, of course. And this one, the colour, of course, is down to the different type of malts that you use. But yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the glass at the bottom, and a kind of steady stream of things going up to the top there. So yeah, appearance-wise, nothing untoward about this beer when you consider what style it is. So we'll have a little look at the aroma and see what we get. Yeah, you know, straight away with this one you get that lovely, big, yeasty, doughy, bready, banana-y sort of thing that you'd expect from the Hefeweizen. Usually with these beers, the malt base is about 40% wheat, and the rest of it's about 60% barley malt in the traditional brews, of course. and these are also very low ABV. But you still get, they're not very low ABV, very low hop content, I should say. This one at 5.6, I think, is actually a little bit stronger than a number of the ones that you can come across. But usually these beers are a little bit better in my experience with a wee bit more ABV to them. But yeah, what I was meaning to say is the hop content in these is usually not that high. They're usually brewed to only be about 15 IBUs or something like this. But yeah. Aroma-wise, this gives you everything that you would want. So you've got that lovely big white bready base to it. You've got a nice little bit of kind of banana in there, a little bit of kind of more candied bubblegum. Yeah, some clovey spice as well. I'm getting a little bit of brown sugar out of this. There is a little bit of a kind of biscuity, caramelly sort of thing going on, which makes sense when you think about the colour of this being a little bit more amber. There must be a more kind of brown sugary leaning malt in this particular beer. But like I say, lots and lots of white bread. It comes across as quite dense, and that's because of the wheat. But yeah, bit of bubble gum, good little bit of that kind of more clovey spice, and then yeah, a little bit of a kind of brown sugary note on top of that. Biscuit, McVitie's digestive, little very light touch of caramel, this one actually. When I think about the colour of this beer, it actually reminds me more of some of the Weizenbock that I've come across, and of course probably the most famous Weizenbock would be the Aventinas from Georg Schneider-Sohn in Munich. So yeah. But malty-wise and yeasty-wise, this one's very, very nice. It's lovely and smooth. Just gives you everything you would want from the style. The more that I smell of it, I do get a little touch of kind of brown bread out of this one. But yeah, aroma-wise, it's lovely. On the hoppy side of things, you get a lovely little bit of smooth earthiness, a little bit of herbal character. And I would say that overall, the green component really leans toward the more grassy side of things. It's a soft grassiness that you get out of this beer. Throughout the aroma, throughout the yeasty and malty side of this beer, you absolutely get a little bit of cracker, but there's a nice kind of banana note to it, as we've said. Lots of dry apricot. Yeah, lots of dry apricot to the beer. Some nice kind of sultani, dry white, kind of grapey notes. A little bit of a kind of peary character. But yeah, the fruity side of things gives you all that. But the hoppy side of this beer for me leans toward that softer, lighter, grassy end of the spectrum. But in terms of what you'd expect aroma-wise from a Hefeweizen, it gives you everything that you would want. So as I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma, but we're going to get stuck into this one. So this one is the Summer Märchen. Hefeweizen at 5.6% ABV here at Pfefferbräu. Slange, skål, cheers, prost. Oh yeah, that's really nice. It's kind of interesting, this one. When you take it in, it's really quite light in a sense, but then it really thickens out and you start to get a little bit of the creaminess and things that you want from this style. The aftertaste in this beer is absolutely lovely. It's been a long time since I've had a Hefeweizen of any description, come to think of it. I used to love these beers before I moved to Heidelberg back in 2014 when I stayed there for a little while. But then I got into the Helles and things, and I started to find Hefeweizens very thick. But since the New England IPAs have come on the scene, these beers, I don't find them that heavy anymore. But this is lovely. I think this is very, very nicely done. So big thumbs up to Pfefferbräu for this. The Pils was nice, but this one I actually like a bit better than the Pils, I have to say. So yeah, let's break this down. Backbone in the middle third of your palate, you've got a lovely little bit of kind of fresh, hedgehog white bread crust in there. That just forms the backbone of the beer. On top of that, you get the soft, fluffy white bread. You can feel the wheat just thickening everything out. Toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of the kind of banana flavour coming out, but then toward the back of that middle third of your palate, it's more of the kind of clovey, spicy character that the beer is starting to show. So that's quite nice. When you go into the back third of the palate, you can feel these flavours are there, but they are just a little bit taller. But I will say in the middle third of your palate, kind of down the middle line of your tongue, you get a little bit of brown sugar out of this one. There's a wee touch of sweet caramel, a little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity note to it again, but I would add that these come out a little bit more in the aftertaste. You get more sweetness out of this beer in the aftertaste. But like I say, in the back third of the palate, you get more of this. You get a little bit more graininess out of the bread crust. You can feel that white bread and thick wheaty layer is taller. Then on top of that, you get the kind of nice yeasty notes. There's a little bit of a crackery note. Yeah, sort of Jacob's cream cracker. A little bit of a kind of, I would say, woody note in there as well. And you've also got that nice kind of clovey spice coming out of the beer as well. So yeah, the other thing I'd say that on top of the kind of banana notes that you get to this one, there's a little bit of a kind of bubblegum sweetness too, which I really enjoy. But yeah, back third of the palate, the flavour is definitely taller. As you come forward, it just kind of condenses down a little bit, and yeah, it works really, really nicely. So yeah, the way that goes together is pretty awesome. The malty yeasty side of this Hefeweizen gives you everything that you would want from the style, and it's just nice and drinkable as well, which I enjoy. Hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate, there's a little bit of soft, very, very smooth earthiness in there. As we said earlier, this is not the most hop style of beer. As you come further forward, it's a little bit herbal, and that herbal quality pushes further forward until you get just a little kind of splash, if you like, of more floral hops on the front corners of the palate. Round the front curve of the tongue, it's definitely lighter and grassy, and yeah, again, that works quite well for me. Yeah, the grassy notes around the front edge of the tongue, they're kind of wet, but they do have just that little bit of zestiness to them as well, which I really enjoy. So yeah, green side of the green side of the hops in this are very, very nice. But let's focus on the front third of the palate and the fruity side of the beer. So the base of the front third of the palate is again very white bready. Toward the back, you get a nice little bit of a kind of sultana, dried white green grape note. You're definitely getting a little bit of that in there. There is a little bit of a slightly stronger citrus as well, maybe a very slight lemon or something like that. But yeah, as you come further forward, a little bit of dried apricot, a little bit of a kind of dried datey sort of thing, and yeah, that's very, very nice. But yeah, as you come further forward into the front half of the front third of your tongue, a little touch of an oily pear, and then maybe just a wee bit of almost like a slightly datey thing underneath as well, and that just kind of starts to mix in a little bit with the grassy esters this beer has. But overall, as a Hefeweizen, I think this is very, very nice, so it gets a thumbs up from me. Yeah, I think we can round off with the mouthfeel then. So yeah, mid-bodied beer. The carbonation is very, very smooth, I would say. You would want that from a Hefeweizen. You want it to be quite a smooth and kind of creamy beer, but it's not kind of creamy in the same way that the New Englands are. It should have a little touch of cleanliness to it, and you kind of get that with this beer as well. IBU wise, pretty certain this is a sort of standard 15 IBUs. It doesn't feel any more bitter than that, but yeah, the malty side of things is lovely and smooth, little touch of sweetness to it. You get that little bit of dryness from the kind of clovey spice and things, and then yeah, you've got that little bit of dry fruity character to it as well. But really nice Hefeweizen in this. I've certainly enjoyed tasting it. So yeah, that is the Sommermärchen, the summer fairy tale. Hefeweizen at 5.6% ABV. Let's see what else we can get in this one. There are still a few other beers that we need to try. Catch you guys in just a second. So yeah guys, the Hefeweizen is almost done, but I thought it was a good idea to show you just how this place is kind of mellowed out a little bit. There's people starting to queue to go into the theatre, but you can see all the lights and stuff have come on outside now, and yeah, really nice kind of evening vibe. So yeah, let's get cracking on the next beer. So yeah, time to finish this guy. So yeah guys, the next two beers have arrived. So in this one we have the Berliner Weisse. I have never ever seen a Berliner Weisse served in like a little tankard glass like that. But we also have the IPA, which looks like a good solid old West Coast IPA. So let's get these two tastings done. Alright guys, well, time for beer tasting number 3 then here at Pfefferberg. So yeah, beer number 3 is going to be a Berliner Weisse. And as you saw a second ago, this has been served in a very, very unusual way. I've never seen a Berliner Weisse served in a tankard like this before, or a Stein, whatever. But yeah, I was quite surprised when it came out like this, I have to say. So yeah, that's how it goes. But when you're in Berlin and there's a Berliner Weisse on tap, you need to try it. I think that should be a little bit of a rule. So yeah, as you can see, this one has poured a lovely kind of pale golden straw colour. It's certainly not the haziest of Berliner Weisses that I've come across in the past, but it does look very nice. You've got a little bit of that kind of natural haze to it, but yeah, to be honest with you, it is actually pretty crystal clear. There are one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, quite a few smaller bubbles heading up toward the bottom of that head there, but it looks nice. When the beer poured, it came out with like a 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of perfect white head. This one isn't kind of creamy in terms of its colour, but yeah, surprised, as I said, at the way it's been served, but also at the fact that it's so clear. But what can we say, it's probably going to be like a very, very kind of straightforward traditional Berliner Weisse. Yeah, appearance-wise, I don't think there's anything else we really need to say about this one. You can see that it's pretty interesting. So yeah, let's have a wee look at the aroma and see what we get from this one then. Yeah, I'm going to say straight away with this beer, it's actually very humble in terms of its aroma. You get a nice little bit of bread crust in the backbone there, but very soft white bread, little touch of, biscuit to it. You get a little bit of that kind of wheaty sweetness, wheaty smoothness out of the beer. But yeah, I don't think there's anything else we need to say about the malty side of this one. It is pretty straight shooting. But the main thing is, I feel that we can't go into too much depth in terms of the aroma with this one, because the aroma of this beer is just really not that pungent at all. Yeah. But the more that you kind of sugar the beer up and the more that your nose adjusts to it, you start to get a little bit more from the kind of fruity side of the beer, from the hoppy side of things. So yeah, I think this will still be quite interesting to taste. So I would say as well, the more that you sugar this up, you start to get a little bit of a crackery and woody note out of the malt base, and maybe a little touch of brown bread or something like that. So yeah, the beer is quite interesting in that particular regard. Yeah, pretty good, pretty interesting. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things, again, you've got a little touch of earthiness, but you get a good, for me, the green component of this beer really leans toward a more wet, kind of grassy sort of thing, but of course, the sour beer yeast that's in this one is going to play a role there too. So you get a little bit of floral character, some nice wet, grassy sort of things. But yeah, it really is quite interesting in that regard. For me, it's got a good little bit of a kind of juicy, limey character on the fruity side of things. Yeah, good little bit of juicy lime. There is a little bit of a kind of fresh green apple to it, and maybe a little bit of a kind of there's maybe a little bit of a kind of peary note to it, but yeah, fresh green apple, a little bit of juicy lime, and a bit more of a kind of lemony sharpness to it for me. But yeah, it's quite an interesting beer, this one. As I say, the aroma isn't too pungent and it's not too deep compared to the Pilsner or the Hefeweizen that we've had so far. But again, the fact that when I asked what the beer of the week was, they told me it's a Berliner Weisse. We're in Berlin, we need to try the Berliner Weisse. So yeah, I don't think there's anything else we really need to say about the aroma of this one. It smells like a kind of old school Berliner Weisse, I think we should say. So yeah, let's have a taste of this and see what we have. Slange ut, skål, cheers, Prost. Yeah, again, the flavour on this one for me, it's a very light, kind of easy-going beer, this one. It's very, very easy to drink. It shows you a little bit of its sour side further into the aftertaste, but it is just very, very easy-going. Yeah, for me, I think I have to admit, I would say, I think the Pilsner and the Hefeweizen, I think the Hefeweizen is the best beer we've tried so far. But this is quite interesting in the sense that it's very different from the other Berliner Weisses that I've tried. And of course, the Berliner Weisse and the Gose, these are the two German sour beer styles that have been played with so much by the more kind of new American style craft brewers. So it's quite interesting to come back and see what the roots of the Berliner Weisse actually are. And it is a nice beer, this one, but as I say, it's quite it is quite straightforward and quite easy going. But we say that about the more modern variants of this style too. I like this, I do like this, but like I say, I still think the Hefeweizen is probably the best beer we've tried so far. So yeah, let's try and break this beer down a little bit and see what we have. Middle third of the palate, again you've got a little bit of that grainy, fresh white bread crust. There's a little bit of a very light white bready note to this one. You can feel the bready character in this beer feels like really wet. It is almost just like a really wet, fresh white bread in a sense. Yeah. There is a tiny little bit down the middle line of your tongue. There's a tiny little bit of a biscuit sweetness to this beer as you move further out toward the edge of the palate. In that middle third, so you get a little bit more of the kind of grainy side of the biscuit. But yeah, this is a very straightforward beer. A little bit of bread crust, white bread, and it's quite a wet white bread, then just a little bit of biscuit sitting on top of that in the middle third of the palate. The back third of the palate is much the same, but the bread crust is a little bit more grainy. The white bready layer is a little bit taller, and again, it feels a bit more dense in that sense. And then you've got and then yeah, on top of that, you have a sort of a little bit of a more kind yeasty note to this one. So there's a little bit of crack and a little bit of that woody kind of note coming out of the beer as well. So yeah, it's interesting in that regard. But again, back third of the palate, the flavour is definitely taller, and then it condenses down as you go further forward into the middle third of the tongue. Let's look at the hoppy side of things with this beer. It's kind of interesting with this, because you do get a little bit of hoppy character from this one, but it is very, very minimal. I mean, back corners of the palate, teeny little bit of earthiness. As you come further forward, you get a little bit of herbal note, teeny little bit of floral note in the front corners of the palate. Then round the front curve of the tongue, it's a lot lighter and grassy. It's a very wet, hoppy character that you get out of this beer. And you know, many modern American style brewers don't put hops in Berliner Weisses and Goses these days because they feel they don't add much to the brew. And I would be very curious to know whether they have actually added some hops to this beer, because it does feel very, very wet in a sense. I think there might be a little bit, but really not all that much. Let's focus on the fruity side of the beer then, front third of the palate. Yeah, front third of the palate, the base is definitely a soft white bread, and the fruity side of this one is very light. It's almost like a really, really dilute, a really, really well diluted apple juice that you get out of this one. There's a lot of fresh green apple in this beer. You get a little bit of lime just as you reach the front kind of tip of the tongue, but yeah, there's maybe tiny little bits of a sort of gooseberry, little tiny bits of a kind of gooseberry, white grapey sort of thing at the back of that front third of the palate. So yeah, dry white sort of green grape, little bit of gooseberry, and a lot of fresh green apple in this one for me. So yeah, as a Berliner Weisse, this is kind of interesting. It's a very, very wet beer, this. I don't think we need to say anything more about the flavour profile, so we should go more onto the I think we should go a little bit more onto the actual mouthfeel of this one then. So very, very light bodied beer this. I think at the top end of light bodied for me. Carbonation does have a degree of crispness. The tartness that you get out of this beer, when it comes in, it has a little bit of tart impact, but then it just becomes very, very wet, and you get that kind of sort of fresh green apple diluting juice type vibe out of the beer. So it comes across very wet. IBU wise, I think this is very low, maybe 5 IBUs, something like that. And then yeah, there's a little bit of malty smoothness and sweetness in there. And yeah, you have a little bit of a kind of wet, fruity character to the one, just a very slight sourness. So yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about this beer. So yeah, that was the Berliner Weisse beer number 3 here at Pfefferbräu. So let's go on to the next one. Okay guys, well, let's have a little look at the drinks menu then and see what we think. So yeah, this is quite interesting artwork, I have to say, from Shankhalle Pfefferberg. But yeah, when you open up, of course, on this page over here, we have the different beers. So far we've tried the Pils, the Sommermärchen, and the beer of the week, which is a Berliner Weisse. But yeah, you can see you're talking roughly in the region of €4 for a 300 milliliter 0.3 litre beer, and about €6 or so for a 0.5. So it is a little bit more expensive than some other places you'll come across in Germany, but yeah, this is quite a trendy district of Berlin from what I gather, so yeah, you would kind of expect it to be a little bit more. But yeah, €4 is in the region of like £3.50 or $4.50 American, whereas €6 is probably like £5.50, maybe $6.50 American, something like that. But yeah, decent selection of beers here. The Pils, the Sommermärchen, the beer of the week, which was the Berliner Weisse. We're going to try the Schnauze and the IPA a little bit later on, of course. But yeah, you can see a few different things on the menu. They've got some different white wines from different regions of Germany and across the US. Good little bit of red wine as well. Some gin and tonics. Yeah, some long drinks. Actually not a bad price for an Aperol Spritz, although yeah, quite a bit cheaper than we would pay in Sweden, of course. But yeah, different rums and bourbons and scotches and things. Dalwhinnie, of course, would be my choice here. I need to try a few more bourbons, I think, to give them a bit of a chance. But yeah, some vodkas as well. Some Kräuter und Co. I guess this is maybe sort of German schnapps type thing. Alcohol-frei, heiße Getränke, you know, hot drinks basically. Yeah, then some more interesting artwork. So that's a little quick look at the drinks menu for you here at Schankhalle Pfefferberg. So yeah. Alright guys, well, time for our fourth and penultimate beer tasting then here at Pfefferbräu. So yeah, this beer is called Flower Power. It comes in at 4.7% ABV, and this one is an IPA. So yeah, I'm guessing from the appearance of this beer that this one is going to be more of a kind of old school West Coast IPA. As you saw earlier when it poured with about a finger of a frothy, I would have said slightly kind of fawn, ivory coloured head. But yeah, it looks pretty nice. You can see the colour of this beer is pretty rich and amber. Remember, the colour of the beer depends on the type of malts that you use. And when it comes to these more West Coast type IPAs, which I'm guessing this one is going to be, they will have a little bit of kind of caramel or biscuit malt or things like that in them. The German ones, in my experience, tend to use a little bit of crystal malt, whereas the American ones tend to use some kind of Turo. But regardless, I think it is safe to assume that this beer is most likely to be more akin to a West Coast type IPA. Remember, of course, the main differences between the West Coast and the New England IPAs. The West Coast IPAs rely more on barley malt, and they tend to be more bitter and, you know, a little bit more kind of biscuity or caramelly in the malt base. It just kind of depends what way they lean, whereas the New Englands contain barley malt, oat malt and wheat malt, and they give you this big kind of hazy sort of thing. So I think, as I said earlier, it is pretty safe to assume this one is going to be more of a West Coast IPA. But you can see it's got a nice little bit of natural haze to it, one or two big bubbles sticking toward the bottom of the glass and a few little ones just going up toward the bottom of that head there. And the head, I have to say, has retained quite well on this one, but definitely I think this is, from the appearance, I think this is going to be a more kind of caramelly type affair, this one. So yeah, let's take a little look at the aroma and see what we have with this one then. Yeah, straight away you get a good little bit of brown sugar out of this beer. At 4.7% ABV, I will point out as well that it's actually quite low in ABV for a more West Coast type IPA. These beers, in my experience, tend to be best when they're in the high 6s, low 7%. So I'm curious to see what this is going to have in store for us, because I was a big fan of the early West Coast American style IPAs that I tried that were German brewed. So yeah. But this is very, very nice. Straight away with this one, a little bit of kind of a more brown bready bread crust, some kind of wholemeal, almost rye bready type sweetness in there as well. One or two little woody notes, but definitely a nice big oily sweet caramel coming out of this one. You do have a little bit of a dry, very, very lightly toasted caramel to the beer as well. Some nice kind of biscuity malts too, but yeah, I think the way that goes together in the malty side of things is very, very nice. Yeah, lots of kind of bread crust, some lovely kind of brown bready notes. Yeah, little touch of woods, little bit of toasty brown sugar, and a big oily, sweet, caramelly sort of thing. So yeah, aroma-wise, the malty side of things is pretty spot on for me. As I've said in other videos, for me a West Coast IPA can go two ways. It can be a little bit more kind of biscuity, such as the Russian River, Pliny the Elder, or it can be a little bit more kind of oily and caramelly, such as the Sierra Nevada Torpedo, and I think this one is definitely leaning more toward a kind of Sierra Nevada Torpedo sort of thing. So yeah, big oily, caramelly leaning West Coast IPA, this one. On the hoppy side of things, I would say that the green component of this one is not too pungent, and remember, West Coast IPAs use a lot of early edition hops. Early edition hops within the first hour of your wort boil are going to give you lots of kind of bitterness. Late edition hops give you a little bit of bitterness, but mainly flavour and aroma, and then dry hopping is of course what it gives you, just completely flavour and aroma. New England IPAs tend to rely on the latter two, whereas West Coast IPAs have the latter two, but also a lot of early edition hopping as well. Yeah, so for me, the green component of this beer, it's got a little bit of earthiness, a big oily floral note, and the more that you smell of this beer, the deeper that kind of floral note becomes. So yeah, lovely kind of deep floral note there. I would hesitate with saying it's kind of piney and resinous. I think it is more of a kind of deep floral character, but you've got a nice big oily grassy note coming out of this one, and it is very slightly zesty as well. So yeah, aroma wise, this one is very, very nice in that sense. I like the green component this beer has. On the fruity side of things, there's something very, very familiar about this. It strikes me as being a little bit more old school. I get quite a little bit of Cascade note out of this one. You know, you've got a little bit of that kind of datey, figgy note in the backbone. It has got a good little bit of orange as well, so it could be a little bit more, it could have a little bit of Amarillo, but we are in Germany of course. It could be Mandarina Bavaria, it could be something like that. Yeah, I've got a feeling, because the green component does have a little bit of that German noble character to it, the earthiness and the slight floral grassy note. But yeah, I want to say there's maybe a little bit of Cascade in this, and potentially a little bit of Mandarina Bavaria. Yeah, a lot of Cascade for me. That, you know, there's a little bit of the grapefruit, a little bit of a datey kind of figgy note coming out of the beer, but a lot of orange. So Amarillo potentially, or Mandarina Bavaria, I want to say. But aroma wise, this one's very, very nice. You guys know, if you've watched the channel for a fairly long time, you will know that when it comes to the West Coast IPAs, I'm a sucker for these big orangey leaning ones. But yeah, aroma wise, this is very nice. I think we need to have a taste of this one now. So yeah, this one is the Flower Power 4.7% IPA, obviously a West Coast IPA. Sláinte, skål, cheers, prost. Yeah, it's pretty solid, that. When I first tried German brewed IPAs, they always had a little bit more breadiness and things to them, and you get that with this beer. I think it is just the German malt. I've always found that, you know, German malt from the likes of Weirmann and Bamberg, it always has this big, just smooth breadiness to it, and you get that out of this beer straight away. You get that nice big thick German breadiness to it, but then you get the lovely kind of brown sugars on top. So yeah, wouldn't be surprised if this is some kind of Weirmann crystal or something like that that's been used in the malt base here. But it's a solid West Coast IPA, and if I was to taste this blind, I wouldn't guess that it was 4.7%. I'd probably think it was maybe about 6 or something like that. So that's another interesting point to make about this beer. But let's break it down. So yeah, backbone of the middle third of your palate in this one, then you get a little bit of that more dry kind of brown bread crust there, and on top of that you've got a layer of a slightly sweet kind of German rye bread out of this one. As I've said to you in many videos too, I miss the German bakeries Used to love going down to Bismarckplatz and Heidelberg and getting a nice rye bread for the weekend. It was always good. But yeah, toward the front of that middle third of the palate, there's a little bit of woodiness in there, very slight nutty notes coming out of the beer. And yeah, then on top of that, there's a good little bit of kind of brown sugary note coming out of this one. So you can feel on top of that kind of brown ready there, you've got a little bit of a dry, toasty, brown sugary character to this one. And in the middle of your palate, you've got a little circle there where you've got the more kind of oily, caramelly notes. And this beer, as I say, it really does feel more boozy than it is. 4.7% is really light for a West Coast IPA. These beers usually are like 6 to 7.2, something like that. But this one, it gives a good impression of itself, I will say that. But yeah, in the dead centre of the palate, you get that more oily caramel. There's a bit of dryness in there, and as you move out toward the edge of the palate, it's a little bit more kind of biscuity as well. So yeah, that works really nicely. Yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the malty side of this beer, but the further you go into the aftertaste, the more it sweetens up. Back third of the palate, you definitely get a more kind of bready sort of note out of this one. Base layer, the bread crusty notes are a little bit drier, the brown bready layer is a little bit taller and a little bit more dry, and then on top of that you have a little bit more of a kind of dry, yeasty kind of note to this one. So yeah, a little bit of a crackery note out of this. So yeah, it's interesting. I like the way that this beer has a little bit of a yeasty backbone to it. So back third of the palate, you've definitely got a little bit more of a kind of taller, bready flavour to this one, and then as you come further forward, it just condenses down a little bit, and then you start to get the sweeter side of things out of this beer. But definitely a more kind of caramelly leaning West Coast IPA, this one, that's for sure. So yeah, other than that, I think we can move on to the hoppy side of things. So back corners of the palate, there's definitely a little bit of earthiness there. As you come further forward, it very quickly develops this very deep floral aromatic sort of thing. I wouldn't be surprised if this beer has a little bit of like Chinook or maybe a little bit of Columbus, because the spicy floral aromaticity in this one is a little bit more reminiscent of Columbus, but it maybe is fair to say there's a little bit of piney resin to this one. Whatever it is very old school in that sense. But as you go round the front curve of the palate, it's definitely lighter and grassy, but at the same time the green component is quite oily for me, I would say. But I like that. I do like that in a West Coast IPA. I want it to have a little bit of bitterness and just a little bit more kind of punch to it. So yeah, that's interesting. Front third of the palate then, fruity side of the beer. Base of that front third, of course, is a slightly sweeter brown bready note, and then on top of that you've got the more oily notes from the fruit. So yeah, back of the front third of your palate then, there's definitely a bit of that strong grapefruit, and I think that kind of backs up what I was saying about maybe Chinook or potentially a little bit of Columbus. Chinook is the one that's most likely to give you that really strong grapefruit, but as you come further forward from that, you've got a more kind of sort of datey, figgy sort of thing, which is Cascade, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a bit of Cascade and a bit of sort of Chinook in this one. I'm pretty sure about those two. But then as you come forward into the front half of that front third of your palate, there's definitely more kind of orangey character to this one. So a bit more of an oily orange, like a little bit of Amarillo potentially. But like I say, we're in Germany. Mandarina Bavaria would be a good candidate for that. So yeah, nice little bit of oily orange there. Then you get the grassy notes out of the beer. But yeah, that's a solid, flavour-wise, that's a solid West Coast IPA. This one, it actually reminds me quite a lot of the Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, which is a classic, and that is a Pale Ale right enough, but this one at 4.7% as an IPA, it's probably not far away from that. Remember the difference between Pale Ale, IPA, double IPA, barley wine and so on. They're defined by the hop to malt ratios. That is the brewing technicality that separates these styles. But yeah, it is nice. Mouthfeel wise then, yeah, mid-bodied, carbonation smooth, it's got a nice oiliness to it, but still a good little bit of cleanliness. IBU wise, This to me feels about 50 to 60 IBUs. You do get a little bit of that, and that lingers there. I think the bitterness builds in the aftertaste. Malt base has a wee bit of kind of crustiness, sort of smoothness to it, but a little bit of sweetness as well. It gets more oily the further into the aftertaste you go. Then you've got that nice little bit of fruity character. But yeah, like I said, reminds me a bit of Sierra Nevada Pale Ale from California, but it does have that, you know, it really reminds me of the likes of the Berliner Berg double IPA that I tried many years ago. It has this kind of old school German brewed IPA character to it, and I always enjoyed those because of the big breadiness. So I think you'll enjoy this if that's your kind of thing. But that is the end of beer tasting number 4. We've got a dark beer to try in just a minute, so catch you guys with that. Cheers. So yeah guys, just to let you see, it's gotten a little bit darker now, so I thought I would move inside to film our last tasting, but I was just kind of sat up over here. But yeah, we'll go in and we'll have a little look, and I'll let you see what the bar actually looks like. So this is really nice, I have to say. Yeah, really nice vibe to this. You can see the brew kettles and stuff are just up there, and you've got this really nice little bar there. So yeah, we can have a little walk up and see. This one is quite an interesting brew kit, and this is obviously just the theatre through here, but you can see this is obviously where they do their brewing, where they take the malt out and stuff like this. Yeah, it's really cool, very old school, nice old copper German things, but yeah, lovely bar, I have to say. Quite unusual compared to some of the other German ones that I've been in before. But yeah, I'm going to wait here for my last beer and we'll film this one inside. So yeah, hope you guys have enjoyed having a little perspective on the bar. Alright guys, so one thing I didn't manage to get until this point in the video was the food menu. So we'll have a little look at this now, and the guys in the bar were very kind and gave me the English one to show you guys. So yeah, they have the Pfefferberg salad, some goat cheese as well, which sounds quite interesting. Celery, yeah. These are of course too healthy for Scottish people, but if we go over here, these are the sort of foods that I would be more interested in. So yeah, the Brauhäuser, a brioche bun with soy pulled pork, sounds quite interesting. The chicken, which you saw me eating earlier, the currywurst, which is always very tempting when you find yourself in Berlin. Some spent grain bread with, you can get salmon tartare, roast beef, cream cheese. Oh, kind of interesting. You can get a veal schnitzel, a beef entrecôte. You can also get some cod, cauliflower, cheese spätzle, and yeah, you get a cheese plate, some chocolate mousse, and some creme brulee. So yeah, the prices here are a little bit more expensive, but yeah, you know, this is one of the kind of trendy districts of Berlin from what I understand. But yeah, that is a quick look at the food menu for you here at Pfefferbräu. So let's get on to our last beer tasting then. Alright guys, well, time for our 5th and final beer tasting then here at Pfefferberg. So I was actually going to film this last beer inside, but the music was quite loud and I thought it was better to be outside just with kind of crowd noise rather than being inside with music blaring that I'm not a great fan of, I have to say. So yeah, I thought I would come outside and film this one. It's also a little bit colder now. I've got my nice hoodie on. There you go. Aberdeen University Chemistry Society represent. 2014 that I graduated with my Masters now, so I feel very old, I have to say. But yeah, regardless, let's get on with looking at our last beer. So this one is a style that I very much enjoy, one of my favourite German beer styles, And this is quite an interesting example of that style actually. So this one is apparently a German Dunkel lager. It comes in at 6.4% ABV and it is called the Berliner Schnauze. So you may recognise that word Schnauze, the German Schnauzer dogs. It means like snout, like nose. So I guess it probably means like German sniffer dogs in a sense. So yeah, quite an interesting name for this beer. But as we said earlier, this one is a Dunkel lager coming in at 6.4% ABV. The last Stein that we had did not have the Pfefferbräu Berlin logo on it, so there you can have a little look at that. So yeah, of course, when it is a Dunkel lager, I love the style. I just had to go for the half litre, and it is the last one of the evening, so again, it's one of these cases where you just have to say, fuck it, why not? But yeah, when this beer poured, it had a solid finger of a frothy, I would say lightly kind of fawn coloured head. It is more of a kind of creamy fawn colour that this one had, but you can see this one has a lovely sort of rosewood chestnutty colour to it. It has a little bit of natural haze because it is a small batch brewed Brauhaus beer. You know, when you come to the German Brauhouses, you're always going to get this kind of natural haziness to the beers. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the bottom of the tankard and a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head. But I have to say the head has retained pretty well on this actually. So yeah, lovely looking beer, this one. Again, remember the colour of your beer depends on the type of malts that you use. But yeah, let's have a look at the aroma of this and see what we get. Yeah, this smells very nice, and what I will say about it straight away is that it is quite typical of the style. So, as I say, the German Dunkel lagers for me, I love these, the Czech Chernies as well. Yeah, this is very, very nice. So straight away with this beer, you get a lovely little bit of that kind of rye bread crust forming the backbone of the beer. There's a lot of thick rye bread, brown bread, wholemeal kind of notes backing it up. Of course, you've got little undertones of kind of nut and wood in there as well. A little bit of tobacco almost out of this one. But the brown sugars are quite interesting because they're quite caramelised. I don't find them overly toasty, but they are quite big and oily and sweet in a lot of ways. So yeah, big oily sweet notes out of this one, slightly caramelised, and there's a little bit of biscuit in there too. But yeah, this beer is backed up by a hell of a lot of kind of brown German rye bready notes. It smells very, very nice. As I say, with the slightly higher alcohol content of this one, I'm quite curious to see how that's going to come out in the flavour, because normally, you know, a Dunkel lager is like, you know, 5.2, maybe 5.5, something like this. When we're getting into 6.4, you know, this is sort of Oktoberfest Märzen territory, if you like. But then the Doppelbock, which again, you know, these are, we compare the Dunkel to the Doppelbock because it is like a brown lager. You know, the Doppelbock can start at like 6.8, so this isn't too far off the Doppelbock territory, if you like. So yeah, this is very, very nice though. But like I say, nice kind of slightly leathery brown sugars in there, a little bit tobacco-y sweet, lovely kind of caramelised brown sugar, as we said, a little bit of biscuit, but lots of kind of rye bready character and a few woody, nutty undertones as well. On the hoppy side of things, it is kind of typical for what you'd expect. Little smooth earthiness in there. The green component in this beer overall is very smooth aroma-wise. Nice little bit of floral character, some soft grassiness as well. The hoppy character in this beer, I would say, is quite oily, and that's quite in keeping with the more malty nature of this beer. On the fruity side of things, yeah, a little bit of a very slight raisiny sharpness to it. A good little bit of a figgy note, but for me it's quite black curranty in some ways. There is a little bit of a sharper blackberry, but yeah, lots of blackcurrant, little bit of blackberry, but yeah, some nice kind of more juicy dark fruity notes to this beer. But yeah, it smells very, very nice. I think it's about time that we have a taste of this beer then. So like I said earlier, this one is the Berliner Schnauze, a 6.4% Dunkel lager, our last beer here at Pfefferbräu in Berlin. Let's get stuck in. Slange, Skål, cheers, Prost. Oh yeah, that is very, very nice. It's another very, very solid beer. I mean, what I would say about the Pfefferbräu beers that we've had, they don't do anything particularly surprising for the style, but they are just like solidly done. And you can, the thing with this one is, what I would say, I've talked about this, the comparison in this video between the Czech lagers and the German lagers. The German ones are always a bit cleaner and more kind of crisp in a way, whereas the Czech ones are a bit more kind of yeasty and bready and things like that. This beer actually reminds me a lot. It has a few elements of the Czech Tmavy to it, but it also has a little bit of the Czech Cherny. So just with the extra strength that this beer has, it does, and the fact that it's Brauhaus brewed, you need to remember this in Germany as well. When a beer is Brauhaus brewed, it is a little bit, it is always going to be more yeasty and cloudy and things. So yeah, regardless, the flavour profile is similar to, for me, it's actually it's more of what I would expect from a Czech Cherny, Czech Tmavy sort of thing. It's somewhere in the middle of that, but at 6.4% it is a bit stronger. That kind of makes sense. But regardless, I think it is very, very nice, and it gives you what you want from the style. So let's break this down. Middle third of your palate then, you've got a little bit of that roasty toasty, and it is almost like a well-fired bread crusty character you get from this one. On top of that, there is a lovely kind of German rye bread character to the beer. Toward the front of that middle third of the palate, there are one or two kind of woody notes, a little bit of a nuttiness in there as well. But you've also got, you also have a little bit of a kind of, within the kind of brown bread, there's a little bit of a slightly tobacco-y character as well. But yeah, on top of that, there's a bit of a, on top of all that bread, you've got a layer of a kind of slightly leathery, caramelized brown sugar to this one, and you get more dryness out of that the further you go into the aftertaste with the beer. So yeah, there's a little bit of that more kind of leathery brown sugar note. In the dead centre of the palate, you'll feel a little circle there, and that is like a kind of sweet. You do have a little bit of that sweet caramel in this one too, but then yeah, as you move further out from that kind of boozy centre of the beer, and you will get a little bit out of this beer, it's 6.4% ABV, and it being a lager beer, you will experience a little bit of that booziness that the beer has. So you can feel a bit of that in this. But on top of the kind of more leathery brown sugars, you start to get a little bit of biscuity character the further into the aftertaste you go, and some of that more tobacco-y, leathery type flavour of the beer also comes out too. But these are, I will say, these are subtleties. You know, we talk about these kind of flavours more when it comes to whiskey and things, but you're getting a good little bit of that in this one. But I think that covers the middle third of the palate. If we go into the back third of the palate, you're getting a kind of similar thing in a way. The back third of the palate, more roasty toasty bread crust. You can feel that brown bready layer is a little bit taller, and it feels a little bit more dense, and then on top of that you get some of the yeasty notes, and that is more like a light, airy sort of brown bread there. But the yeasty notes, you get a little bit of an almost toasty biscuit out of them too, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, back third of the palate, the flavour is definitely taller, and again, as you come further forward, the flavour just condenses down a little bit. But yeah, hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness there. As you come further forward, it's a little bit herbal, and then as you push further forward along the side of the tongue, you get a little bit of floral note out of the beer. Round the front curve of the tongue, definitely lighter and grassy, but there's not the zestiness to this beer on the hoppy side of things that you had with other ones. It is more a kind of smooth and slightly more oily character that you get out of this beer. But for a Dunkel, it is very, very nice, and as I say, to me this one reminds me, it's kind of almost somewhere in between the Czech Cherny and the Czech Tmavy, the Czech brown lager and the Czech black lager. It really is a bit more like that for me in terms of its flavour profile. But we can talk about styles all day. The main question should be, is it a nice beer? It definitely is. Yeah, let's focus on the front third of the palate and the fruity side of things then. So yeah, base of that front third of the palate, lovely kind of smooth brown bready character in there. And it's slightly sweeter, of course. Sweeter flavours come out further forward on the palate. But then on top of that, you've got some of the nice fruity kind of things. At the back of that front third of your palate, you've got a little bit of a kind of datey sort of flavour. That dry kind of datey note. As you come further forward, it gives you a little bit more of a kind of juicy figgy note, and in the front half of the front third of the palate, definitely some black currants, and you maybe just get a little slight touch of blackberry on the front. But for me, this beer, in terms of its fruitiness, is more about the dried fruits, dates, you know, a little bit of a date sort of thing, a little bit of a figgy note, and then a little bit of a black currant, and all of these are quite dry. But yeah, I like the fruity characters that this beer has. Yeah, it is nicely done for sure. Yeah, so I think that's everything we need to say about the flavour profile of the beer. Mouthfeel wise, for me, mid-bodied, right in the middle of the spectrum. For a lager, yeah, it's one of the thicker ones I've come across. Carbonation is very, very smooth. It's got a good little bit of dryness and sweetness in the malt base, like it feels quite caramelised, which I do quite enjoy. And you get a lot of nice kind of you get a lot of nice dry flavours in the aftertaste of this one. You've got a good little bit of more oily, fruity character at this one, and just a little bit of hoppy bitterness. I mean, I think this is about 15, 20 IBUs, something like that. But yeah, this is a really nice way to end the evening. One of my favourite German beer styles. Well, actually, it's somewhere between two of my favourite German beer styles. This is somewhere between a Dunkel and a Doppelbock. But I've enjoyed it. I really have enjoyed trying this one. So I'm going to sit here and enjoy the rest of it, and then I will give you my final thoughts on my time here at Pfefferbräu in a little while. So I hope you guys have enjoyed these tastings. I'll catch you guys in just a second. Slange just now. This was the Berliner Schnauzer, 6.4% Dunkel beer, one of the strongest Dunkels I've drunk on the channel thus far. Alright guys, well that is the end of our time here at Pfefferbräu in Berlin. So yeah, I had a really nice evening here. I got to try some of the food, basically tried all of their own beers that they had on tap, and it was great. I will say that after the Dunkel beer at the end, I am enjoying a little bit of a buzz after that, so we can safely say that the Berliner Schnauzer will fuck your day in the best way. But yeah, David, who was serving me, was very, very nice, told me about all the beers, gave me all the information I needed. That was great. In total, for all of the beers and the food that I had, that came to €37, so that's about, what, maybe £33, something like that, somewhere in the region of like 42 American dollars. So yeah, we got to try 5 different beers. We had a nice meal as well. I think that's pretty good value, I have to say. So yeah, really cool to come and visit Pfefferbräu, and I enjoyed it here. Berlin is a great beer city these days. There's lots of different things going on, so come and check it out. But yeah guys, I hope you enjoyed another out and about video here on Rampant Lion Reviews. I'm finishing this one off with a good little bit of a buzz, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, as always, check out my social media. I'll put Pfefferbräu's social media down in the video description for you below, and we'll see what else we can do while I'm here in Berlin once again. But thank you again for watching. Big thank you to all of you guys for the support of the channel, and see you very, very soon. Slange, skål, cheers. Make sure you check out Pfefferbräu here in Berlin. Prost.